Welcome back. The panel is here. PBS NewsHour Chief Correspondent Amna Nawaz, New York Times Chief White House Correspondent Peter Baker, former White House Political Director for George W. Bush Sarah Fagan, and former Democratic Congresswoman Donna Edwards. All right, I'm going to force a start to our conversation here. One of the real problems for Democrats that was exposed in Tuesday's Virginia elections, rural white voters. Look at this. Look at your screens, guys. Last year, President Trump won Virginia's rural voters by 6 points, 52-46. Actually, not a good showing in Virginia for a Republican. But on Tuesday, Glenn Youngkin won rural voters by 27 points. You'd call that a huge increase. And here's what makes that gain so important. Rural voters increased their percentage of the electorate this year by 3 percentage points. So from 16% of the electorate in 20 to nearly 1 in 5 voters in Virginia were from rural Virginia. It gave Youngkin too big of a lead for McAuliffe to overcome, no matter how well he did in urban and suburban areas. So, Donna, you're representing the Democrats on this one. Rural, if a state, look, I don't know if there's enough votes in rural Maryland to overcome this to give Democrats problem, but clearly there was in Virginia, and there almost was in New Jersey. It's a problem.
I think it is. I mean, one of the challenges is that we're not going to win rural voters, but you have to contest for them. And I think one of the things that Youngkin did that was very effective was he went into Democratic strongholds. He didn't have to win. He just needed to peel off enough.
Chip away, right?
And I think that as Democrats, we have to think about how it is that we contest for some of those voters, pull them into our corner. And I think it's possible to do that. But 1, 2, 3% in these areas can make the difference in the election.
I think it's much more simple than that. Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger said it best. She said, we didn't elect the Democrat. We didn't elect him to be FDR. Right. We elected him to stop the chaos and be normal. And that's not how Joe Biden is governing. And that is why the Democrats lost in Virginia. It's why we saw lots of Republican victories across the country in local elections, school board elections, is that the progressive movement in the Democratic Party is driving the debate. They're driving the intellectual issues on the table. And Democrats, moderate Democrats, Joe Biden is allowing it to happen.
Amna, here's the math, okay? If you are losing 36% of all voters by a 76-24 margin, okay? And this is right now for the Democrats. It means they have to win 65% of all other voters. That's how bad the rural issue is. I think someone said, what's bottom? And someone said, the bottom is 0. And they weren't being facetious.
Yeah, I mean, look, the rural concern for Democrats isn't new either, right? Go back to 2018.
It's just gotten worse.
Heidi Heitkamp and Joe Donnelly, They started a PAC specifically to appeal to rural voters. This has been an issue for Democrats. And I think even if you look just at Virginia, yes, Youngkin was able to drive up the rural vote, got even bigger margins than 2020 among rural and white voters. Also flipped a couple of those key districts in the suburbs and exurbs, right? Chesterfield County outside of Richmond, Stafford County outside of D.C. And then Democrats weren't able to, even though they did increase turnout, weren't able to keep a pace with the GOP increase in turnout. That's the trifecta for Republicans. It's a triple whammy for Democrats. But in addition to COVID and economy, which were the 2 biggest issues for Virginia voters, this education issue we keep talking about, which is not really about how well they read or write or like what they're learning in chemistry. It's about race and racism and history. And that really appealed and turned out a lot of parents in particular in Virginia who've long been frustrated for the last 18 months.
Peter, I think what's gotten lost here is Tuesday's elections were all on Democratic turf. Okay?
Yes.
Whether it's cities or the 2 states that are light blue and dark blue, or so we thought, right, and on those things. And whenever there was a choice from Seattle to Buffalo, in a progressive and a non-progressive, but still left of center, voters even in the cities picked the left of center.
No, they did. That's right. That was true in New York City. That was true in a lot of these other districts and places in Long Island, in other words. And I think what it says is that, in fact, it's possible to overread a single election. Just because Donald Trump lost doesn't mean that Republicans have suddenly lost their traction. In fact, Republicans have done pretty well in the last 13 months, right? They won House seats last year, even as Donald Trump was losing. What Virginia voters showed, and I think other voters around the country showed, is they're willing to vote for Republicans, just not Trump. They didn't want to vote for Trump. Youngkin not only outpaced Trump in terms of winning the state, which Trump lost, he outpaced him across the board. Through almost every city and county in Virginia, he got more votes than Trump did last year, even though it's an off-year election.
But I think that you have, in not overreading an election, you have to look at a combination of factors. The campaign that was run, you can't ignore the candidate and the campaign. You can't ignore the fact that the national context had a lot to do with this election. So I don't think that we can point to one or the other, but Democrats do have to be willing to do some self-examination and to recalibrate when it comes to 22.
But I think if you think about the issues that were being talked about, yes, Terry McAuliffe focused way too much on Donald Trump. But he also was focused on abortion. He was focused on climate change. He was focused on these big partisan issues, while Glenn Youngkin was talking about lowering your grocery taxes in a time of inflation, of education,
By the way, how many times did
crime.
Phil Murphy say kitchen table in my interview?
He said it a lot. He got the memo.
The message?
He got the memo.
He got the memo?
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that was kind of interesting. I mean, it's like kitchen table. It's like, yes, we know. We weren't talking about what voters were talking about.
Right.
Right.
Well,
That's the
how
fundamental
the
issue.
Democrats won in 2018, right? What Nancy Pelosi would tell you is the reason they won the midterms was not by talking about Donald Trump, although he was the context, and that was the environment in which it was taking place, but by talking about health care, by talking about issues that matter to voters.
All right. Look, let's quickly. I'm going to get to the Trump stuff, and we're going to have another conversation about that. But let's talk about what happened on Friday quickly, Amna, because I'm trying to figure out. They spent months saying we're never decoupling these bills.
Right.
They decoupled the bill.
Yes.
And I have no idea what the heck's going to happen to Build Back Better.
Correct.
I don't think it. Okay.
We'll see in 8 days.
We'll see in 8 days?
We'll see in 8 days.
Or 8 weeks? Or 3 months?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. But look, here's what the progressives say, and this is why they're calling it a win. I spoke with Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal yesterday, and she says, look, the 6 Democrats, the moderates who are holding up the bill, I have a personal commitment from them. They're going to support it. They made a commitment in paper to me personally and to the president. This trust deficit they've been talking about, right? They are now talking to each other, the progressives and those 6 moderates in particular. So she has every confidence this is going to move forward. The bigger issue they have here, though, it does go back to the Virginia election, too, which is messaging what is in this thing. I think most people don't even know how it impacts them. The majority of Americans don't know what's in it.
Because last Thursday something was not in it, and now it is in it.
Correct.
Okay,
Which is
paid
why
leave.
the White House is now saying, they're telling you you're going to see the cabinet members out this week. You're going to see transportation and interior and others out.
What are they selling, though?
Specifically,
Are they selling what's already passed?
they're selling what's already passed. Yes. Yeah. Well, they need to take credit. This is the victory lap.
Well, they're going to sell what is in Build Back Better, and I'm actually confident that it's going to make it across the finish line.
But what's going to be in it?
Well, look, I think for the we know pre-kindergarten is going to be in there.
I didn't mean to
we
put you
know
on
the
the
tax
spot.
credit's going to be in there. I mean, there are things that we actually know are going to be in there when it finally passes. And I think that the challenge for Democrats is let's just stop talking about the number. Nobody knows the difference when they don't have $500 in their Wait, they don't know that they have $500 in their bank account. They don't understand what $1 trillion is. And the number, it's going to be paid for, and it's going to benefit individual Americans in their own families.
When you have $500 in your bank account, though, what you see in front of you is a tax increase, and you don't have money to pay for it.
Well,
that's the problem
if
for
there's
Democrats.
not going to be a tax increase, there's going to be a
There will be eventually.
The $600 child tax credit is going to make up for that.
The good news is we get to come back and talk about this a little bit more. But before that, this is an excellent time for me to note that our latest episode of our news magazine, Meet the Press Reports, happens to be an in-depth look ahead at the 2022 midterms. So more Senate races and gov races. It's available anytime right now on Peacock. So go binge away.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.